So I'm getting ready to make the Lattice Dream rolls. I really don't have any baking experience, so I don't really know what to expect. But I will be baking them all free form. I'll be doing some with and some without the butter glaze. And then I'll be doing some with the water and without the water in the oven step. And then I'll be doing some with the cold oven procedure.
Okay, here are my ingredients for the rolls I'll be making today. As you can see, most of the stuff is great value because it was cheapest and I like cheap. So the eggs are great value, the bread flour, the sugar, the baking powder, the yeast, and that's it. I got Crisco for the shortening, and then I have the Morton iodized salt, Arm & Hammer baking soda, Land O'Lakes butter, and then behind there is Prairie Farms whole milk. So hopefully these ingredients make some good rolls, hopefully.
So here's the 1.5 packages of yeast and 2 cups of flour mixture.
So to make these rolls, we'll be using bread flour, which is very high in protein, which means it contains a lot of gluten. I just started to scald this whole milk, and what that's for is it kills any bad enzymes or bad bacteria that may affect the activity of the yeast. So the milk is scalded, so I'm taking it off the heat, and I'll be adding the shortening and the sugar now. So I'm whisking everything together, letting it all dissolve, and then after about 5 minutes, I'll add it to the yeast and flour mixture. So I added the milk mixture to the flour, and as I mix this, I'll incorporate air through this whisk, and gluten will form. And after this, I'll let it sit for about 30 minutes, maybe close to an hour. And as it rests, it'll start to rise, and that's because gluten kind of acts like a sponge. It'll soak up all the liquid and expand. So I just pulled out the dough after about 2 hours, and I'm gonna get ready to add the 2 cups of bread flour, 1/2 cup at a time. I don't have a stand mixer, so I'll be kneading it on the counter here. I'll just start by putting some flour on the counter so it doesn't stick to the counter. So I just pulled it out of the bowl, and I haven't added any of the bread flour yet. And it's really, really sticky. So once I add it, it will become more tender. And kneading it will form gluten and air pockets to give it that, like the bread, the airy texture.
Okay, so I just added my first 1/2 cup to the dough. It was very, very sticky, but now that I've added it, it's become much more together, I guess. So I'll be kneading this until all the flour looks like it's been incorporated, and then I'll add the next 1/2 cup. So what kneading does is it adds air into the dough, and it also creates more gluten for the bread. So, yeah. So I'll go ahead and add the next 1/2 cup. And then I'll continue to do this 2 more times. Okay, so I just added the 2 cups of flour and I kneaded it together. So now I'm gonna let it rest for about an hour. And as it rests, it'll start to rise. And how it rises is the yeast feeds on the starches in the dough and releases CO2. So that CO2 gas will build up and cause the dough to rise. So it's been about 2 hours and I pulled it out, and it didn't really rise as much as I thought it would, but I'm getting ready to add the 2 eggs and the egg yolk and the butter. So I'm getting ready to add my first egg and beat it in. I added the first egg, and now I've added the second egg and the egg yolk and the softened butter. So adding the egg whites kind of acts as a leavener, which will help it rise overnight. And then adding the egg and egg yolk will help it tenderize and delay the staling. Adding the butter, the fat,
will help the dough become light and tender. So I'm letting the dough rest in the fridge overnight, and then I'll get to the rest tomorrow. Okay, so I have 1 cup of bread flour. I'll be adding that to this bowl. So 1 teaspoon salt, and here's the other teaspoon of salt. Here's the 1 teaspoon of baking powder. And then finally the 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. So I'll be adding this flour, baking soda, salt, baking powder mixture into the dough. And I've let this dough sit out for about, 12 hours-ish in the fridge overnight. So I'll knead this into there. And then, okay, so I finally kneaded this guy all together. So I'll divide them into 4, and then divide each 4 into 5 different pieces to give me 20 total. And then I'll brush the top with butter and salt and then let them rise for an hour and a half. Okay, so I got these shaped into little balls, and I cut little crosses in them, or at least tried to. And I have the melted butter and the salt mixture, so I'll be brushing all of these with them, and then I'll do the same with these, and I'll let them rise for an hour and a half. So the rolls on the top have the glaze, the ones in the middle don't have the glaze, and then the ones on the bottom have the glaze, and then I decided to roll them up to see what would happen. I'll be doing the normal procedure that's noted under the directions. So you set it to 425, you put boiling water on the lowest shelf, and then in the middle shelf is where you put the rolls, and then you bring it up to 450, which is the normal baking temperature. So here I'm raising it up to 450, and as you can see I put the rolls in, and the bottom shelf has the boiling water. So they cooked a lot quicker than I expected, so I pulled them out like 10 minutes early, maybe 20 minutes even. So these are the ones that I rolled up with the butter glaze on them. They look alright. The ones in the middle are the no glaze. They kind of look sad. And then the ones on the far right are like the normal butter glazed ones. So I'm doing these 3 with no boiling water on the bottom rack. And these will be set to 450, and it'll probably take 20 minutes, just like last time. So I pulled them out a little bit too late, probably. The bottoms got a little burnt, and I think that's due to them being exposed to the heating element. And the other ways, they had the boiling water to sort of buffer the heat to make the bottoms not as burnt. So for the rest of these rolls, which are all butter glazed, I'll be doing the cold oven method. So I'll be putting the rolls in a cold oven, and then I'll put boiling water in the bottom shelf, and then bringing it up to temperature, which is 450. So just to be sure, it is cold, and those will probably go in for, I'm guessing, another 20 minutes. So the cold oven rolls look pretty good. I think this is just because I paid the most attention to them. The bottoms aren't burnt at all, which is nice. So I just finished the light as a dream rolls, and the best were probably the normal butter glazed ones with the normal baking procedure. I only ate about 2 because I'm trying to eat healthy. Rolls don't really help that. But I'm pretty impressed with myself. I think I did pretty well considering my skill level in baking. One thing I could have improved on is the kneading, I think, and probably the time of addition of things. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the next recipe.